Clarence Dealer, Les Cowboys. A couple of things. Quinnen Williams, can you update his status? And certainly Tyler Guyton.
Yeah, Quinnen's doing better. We'll see how he moves through the protocol. He is doing better. And then Guyton, again, get him on the grass today, see how he does, but still not sure on that one.
A couple of times since Sunday, Jerry Jones expressed surprise or shock how bad or how poorly the defense has played. I don't know if you share that same sentiment that you expect them to play better. What has gone wrong with the defense?
Yeah, well, obviously, we meet all the time after games, and we talk and we go through the game as coordinators and staff, and we sat down, and me and Clayton and Nick and Flus, and we go through the game with Jerry and Steven, and, again, none of us played good enough. We've talked about the defense quite a bit. We just have not played to the level we want to play. We know that, but you're just going to keep working, and that's what we have to do. And we've got another great opponent coming in this week with a great quarterback and weapons that he knows how to do, and they run the hell out of the football. And we're going to focus on trying to get the Chargers.
Brian Schottenheimer with ESPN. Back on Quinnen for a second. Will he be out on the field doing stuff, or is it still too soon for that?
Yeah, again, he won't do anything today. We're in pads, so he won't do anything today.
And then the communication on defense, you've talked about that a lot during the season. It seems like there was issues maybe during the game about personnel groupings and getting in and out, and I think you had to burn a timeout in this second quarter.
Yeah, down the red zone.
What's been the problem with that, do you think?
Well, every once in a while there's headset issues. Those do happen. I mean, they happen on offense. The headsets don't always work perfectly. And but the biggest thing, I think, is just the urgency of the call coming in from Flus and then getting communicated from the green dot and then getting lined up. It's not been perfect. We need to be better because if you're late to get lined up, which we were, it makes the players uneasy, certainly. And then we were doing a number of things, Todd, where we were trying to match certain receivers on guys. And looking back in hindsight, probably tried to match too many guys. And so a number of things affect that.
John Schroeder with The Athletic. Jerry also said on the radio yesterday, talked about how he thinks the future of the program is very bright. I was wondering, from your perspective, going in these final 3 games and then looking beyond, like where do you think the program's at right now?
Yeah, again, I'm going to reserve that for when the season's over. Like I said, you guys asked me the other day about, if you don't make the playoffs, will it be the year be a success? And what was my answer? It doesn't change. We get judged on winning and losing, and we haven't won enough games. So doesn't mean there's not going to be things we look back that we're like, hey, we've built this and this is great. Man, we've really upgraded this position or we've done that. But again, I'm not going to, John, say, okay, well, now I'm going to go and say I'm going to stay in the moment, and I'm going to be all about the Chargers. And after we go and play the Chargers and hopefully win, I'm going to be all about the Commanders and then the Giants and then see what happens. And then we'll take a broader, bigger picture at that point.
All right, well, then you won't like this question probably either. But
That's good.
Joe Milton, if you guys are eliminated, is there at any point where you'd want to see him play?
I want to win, so plan would be to play Dak.
Nick Harris, Forward Star Telegram. A few weeks ago, you guys talked about competition at right tackle. Now that you've seen Terrence Steele and Nate Thomas start a few games consecutively, how would you evaluate that competition right now?
Again, I think, when you talk about the last 2 games, we haven't protected Dak very well. Nick, I think I'm always going to put myself out there first. I thought, again, Flores frustrated us with some things, and I needed to be better. But the biggest thing for me with the tackles specifically, which you asked about, is the fundamentals and the sets and the leverage and how they're keeping inside alignment and stuff like that. But we need to play better. We need to keep Dak upright. We need to let Dak throw out of a firm pocket, because when you give Dak that type of time, we've all seen what he's capable of doing. And that's what we did for a lot of the year. And the last 2 games, I think, truly are, situations where we struggle a little bit when we don't do that.
You're opening some practice windows today. What do you want to see from those guys over the next 3 weeks?
Yep. Yeah, so we'll open up the window for Josh Butler. We'll open up Peyton Turner and then Phil Maffa. Just a chance to get them on the grass, and see these guys compete a little bit. We're in pads today, which would be great, and I know those guys are really, really excited to get back out there and play the game that they love.
Tommy Arch, DallasCowboys.com. We're playing the Chargers, a team that was the last NFL team your dad coached for in the last years that you spent with them. Does this game carry any kind of sentimental value, and what do you remember about your time in San Diego?
I wouldn't say it's any more sentimental value. I think, there's a lot of people in that organization that I am very fond of, both from the equipment room to the Spanos family and people like that. A lot of coaches on that staff that I know, Sanjay Lal and people like that. But again, I just get, I get focused on, prepping to play a really good team. I mean, they've won, I think, 3 in a row. They're playing really good on defense. I think they're second in the league in defensive stats, which gets me excited. I like to play good defenses, and at the end of the day, it should be a very physical football team or football game because they play very physical, and we try to pride ourselves on doing that as well.
And then on the defense, Derwin James is a guy that moves around and plays in a lot of different spots. What makes him kind of different from some of the other guys that are versatile in terms of where they line up?
Yeah, he's a stud. He's good in coverage. He's a great blitzer. He's a good run defender. They're using him a lot in what we call Buffalo nickel, where they put the bigger body in there to get him closer to the ball to try to impact the game and make plays. And funny story, I remember we were playing him his rookie year in Seattle, and I was out for pre warm-ups, and I was like, man, who's that defensive end? And they go, nah, I'm not a defensive end. I said, who is it? They said, that's their first-round draft pick, the safety. I was like, oh, damn. So obviously his size, athleticism, he's been doing it at a high level for a long time, and one of the best box safeties in football, in my opinion.
Joe. Joe Hoyt, Dallas Morning News. You said earlier this season you're the president of Javonte Williams Fan Club. Obviously, he's had a great year, impending free agent. What have you seen from him this year that might suggest potential success down the road and maybe here as well? Yeah,
again, I just, I can't give him enough praise. I think, we to see him, play really well last week, I think we're learning. Javonte, we want to be a little bit smart with him during the week. He's had a lot of carries this year and doing a great job. But just the way he approaches, the preparation. Like, he's a guy that truly gets it, man. Like, he understands that to be a great player, you have to come to meetings ready to roll, be dialed in, ask questions, take great notes, go to walkthroughs. If something's messed up, hey, I need that again, clear it up in my brain, go to practice and do things the right way. And for a young player, I think that's I refer to him as young because he is young, but I think that's where you see the work ethic, you see the maturity, you see the intelligence, and then the talent. And I hope he's a Cowboy for a long time.
Ed Porter, WFAA. When Jerry essentially says publicly that he's going to evaluate your defensive coordinator over the next final 3 games, what's your reaction to that, and how do you handle that with Flus and his coaching staff?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, Ed, we all understand the business we're in, and this is the National Football League. I think Flus is a great coach. We have not played well enough in that area. But my biggest thing is, I've been Flus. I've been through those people, saying, hey, what about Schotty and this position? Yeah, that's part of it. We're used to it. So my job is to help Flus and the entire staff to come up with a great game plan and try to play the best we can these next 3 weeks. And that's what I'm committed to doing.
Garrett.
Garrett Podell, CBS Sports. Brian, you talked about the Chargers defense being statistically one of the best. What stands out in terms of what they do structurally? What's kind of their calling card with Jesse Minter this year that you appreciate?
They're not very complicated. What they do well, they're wise, they're smart with their pieces, meaning the way they use Derwin. The flexibility they have with their defensive ends. They're deep there with Khalil Mack and Thule, and then you got Bud Dupree, and they're big and strong. The backers, both Perryman and Henley, are very physical players, but you can't watch their film and not get caught up in how physical they are. I mean, they're a physical defense, and I remember Jesse coming in the league 2 or 3 years ago, whatever it's been, I guess 2 years ago, and I immediately was, a fan because I just saw the way those guys played and the way they impacted the game, and I think he's done a hell of a job for that organization.
Christy Scales, Cowboys Radio 105.3 The Fan. More on the defense. High number of interceptions, and it looks like they spread the wealth with that. Lots of different players. Attribute that with pressure, or they do a lot of stuff, or what do you see with that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Christy. They play a lot of spot drop coverage. So what's that mean? It means they're dropping to locations and landmarks. So, okay, I got to get inside edge of the numbers. I got to get in the alley. I got to be on the hash. I got to be there, and they all have vision on the quarterback. So anytime the quarterback is affected and the ball does not go where it's supposed to go, they've got eyes on the ball, which allows them to make plays on the ball. And any errant throw, they usually penalize you for it. And so when you put that with a team that I think has 40 sacks, or 4th or 5th in the league in sacks, it's a good compliment. So they rush the passer well, they're big and physical, and then they've got all eyes on the quarterback. So errant passes are not a good thing against this defense.
Saudis at The Athletic. Brian, kind of a broad type of question. Often we see in the shotgun, running backs are next to or slightly behind the quarterback. When you have the running back ahead of the quarterback, just what's the in front of the quarterback? What's the intention that when offenses do that?
Yeah, interesting question. It's a great question. There's different philosophies. The number one thing you would say is, obviously, I've always talked about how you want to create the depth of the pocket. It starts in the A gaps. When you keep your back at depth, if the guy blitzes, there's a collision that usually happens about 2.5 yards deep in the backfield, and the quarterbacks are trusting that the back's going to get there. That's one reason. The bigger issue is now there's so many picks on side that, like, they pick the guard, or they'll pick the center, or they'll pick the guard, and they'll wrap the defensive lineman with the backer. When you're at different depths, it's almost impossible to pass that off. So by moving them up into location, they can work together. It'd be like Tad and I working together to pass a game would be a lot easier than me and you working on a game because of the proximity to one another. So that's one of the reasons why we do it.
And if your back is there and if you need help on the edge, is it still possible for the back to get over and help the tackle on the outside?
That's why people do it, because they know when you get stuck down in the A gaps right there, that's why they know, hey, you can't help the tackle. So we do a lot of our chips with tight ends and things like that on the edges. So it's just different philosophies, and not right or wrong, but again, it's designed for a reason, and everybody has it.
Ready, that it? Good. Todd?
I'll ask the weekly, daily Trayvon question. Will he practice today?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. We'll all be out there in pads having a hell of a practice. All right, guys. Thank you.